So thanks everybody for joining today. We're going to talk about practical ways to implement AI in your organization. Just to level set, most people on the attending list are familiar with Kapoq, but those of you that are not, we're the smart way to manage brands. We're an end-to-end solution working with brands, agencies that support brands on Amazon and Walmart, giving them an effective solution to leverage all aspects to manage those brands across marketplaces. I know everybody was expecting Shelby, but you have me for today, for better or worse. Shelby unfortunately couldn't make it today, but I'm Mark Blumberg. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Kapoq.
And I'm George Viamontes, Director of Research and Development at Kapoq. I've been with Kapoq from about the beginning, and my background's in computer science, and I lead up, relevant to today's discussion, I lead up development on the MCP server, among other things.
Well, George, we're glad to have you today. So, what we're going to talk about in the next hour, we're going to talk about how to plan first with AI tools to produce better outcomes. We're also going to touch on what are agents or sub agents and when to use them. And then we're also going to touch on practical nuances to know about security and reliability, because I think that's a big thing that people don't actually focus on. Everybody's leaning into AI, leaning into MCP, but not a lot of people are talking about security, and that's one area that we are highly focused on. So we're gonna spend a little bit of time talking about that today. Then George's gonna walk us through a demo around diagnostics, tool, and iterations on it, as well as a client-facing dashboard skill and how to use them. So that's what's on the table. And again, this is a Ask Me Anything webinar, so please ask. That's what we're here for. Pick George's brain, and we'll go deep as anybody wants. All right, George, do you see that slide? First
I
slide?
do, yes. Yeah, happy
Okay.
to speak to these points. So, yeah, one of the main things we want to talk about, and even among developers, I'll be honest, not all developers are even aware of this point about sort of polished way, if you will, effective way to use AI. Really, you want to do a lot of planning with your AI, even if you're not even just for coding, but if you want to build a dashboard, you want to do an analysis, diagnose an issue with one of your brands or accounts, you want to really scope out with the AI what you want it to do ahead of time. And this sounds simple enough, but it's actually a really important piece of the puzzle. And to the point where there's plugins that we use, for example, within Kpoc for our development, called one is called Superpowers. Great example. You tell it what you want to do. Say you want to create some dashboard. It'll then ask you some clarifying questions because often as humans, we kind of know in our head what we want, but we don't necessarily, even as a developer, we might have not have the mindset to explicitly lay it out step by step and cover every detail of what we're thinking when we describe it. And this sort of forces you to do that a little bit. So instead of having the AI sort of guess and fill in the holes and give you something that's maybe not quite what you want or something that's pretty far off the mark, a tool like Superpowers or a good, well-developed skill should be asking you some clarifying questions to really get at what you're trying to do. And so you'll see this in our demo today. The skill we have prepared actually does have built-in clarifying questions. So you'll see this in action. And again, we recommend this to everyone. It's not just about development, but it does heavily guide our internal flow and how we use this at Kpoc. So this is another interesting topic here. It's very relevant to the planning phase. This doesn't come up necessarily in every task you want to do in AI, but most people here are going to be familiar with what we call the main session. You go into your AI chat, that's a session, that's an AI session. It has a context window, like a brain, a memory that gets filled up over time as you ask it questions and it answers your questions or does things for you. But what a lot of people aren't aware of, and they've probably heard the term thrown around out there, is using these other agents or agent orchestration or sub agents. So we just wanted to kind of touch on that. So in your workflow, especially when you're doing something very structured where you do have that planning phase, a really nice other trick you can employ, and many well-designed skills will do this for you, is to once you're done planning, it'll actually ask you to how you want to implement the plan. So how you want to implement either a coding project or diagnose a problem or do some data analysis, generate a dashboard. Depending on the complexity of the project, it may suggest using other agents to help implement the actual plan. And why would you want to do this? The reason, again, comes down to the tokens and the context windows. So as you're using that main session, you're filling up its brain, its short-term memory, Once you hit a certain point, it becomes less effective. Everyone talks about AI sessions getting lazy, making mistakes. This tends to happen a lot more as you use the session for a longer and longer time and keep doing more and more things with the same session. What these other agents let you do is they basically can go and do an implementation for you or do the deep dive, do the analysis with a fresh brain. So they actually have a much better chance to implement the task and those details on behalf of the main session's plan that you worked out with it. It's going to have these agents are going to do a much better job essentially. And the way this works is that your main session is like the orchestrator. It can actually spawn them for you on your behalf. You don't have to actually ask it to do that. It can recommend it. And we'll see this in the skill we're going to walk through today. But essentially, it's not as hard as people make it out to be. You can actually have the skill do this for you. Yeah. So the first point here hits on what I was just discussing. One pain point again is there's a tendency to overuse a single session and just kind of use it for everything. And it seems like intuitively like it might be a good idea because it's like this session knows everything I've done so far. In theory, that's true. But the problem is it can't keep all that in its memory. And the more stuff you have in there in its brain, the less effective it becomes. So you really want to be spawning a new session for a specialized task. You want to allow that session to use agents if it thinks it's the right thing to do so that you're really approaching every task or every piece of a plan with an agent with a fresh brain ready to go. Some of the security concerns that Mark brought up here, these are things that I think not a lot of people talk about. There's going to be a lot of issues coming up here as people are generating dashboards, things that connect their data through MCP connections. They're going to be sharing this stuff, right? And this is new. A lot of people, which is a good thing, are now exposed to being able to essentially write code and make apps, and they were never coders before. And so a lot of people are going to have to relearn and make the same mistakes we've done in programming for many decades now, and security is a big one of them. One thing, for example, people don't realize is that an Anthropic who makes Claude, we always recommend you check that setting that says don't feed my data back to the model, or go by your own company's internal security policy. ChatGPT has a similar one. Most of the major ones have an option to uncheck that. That's called a zero data retention policy. So in that scenario, your data doesn't go back to Anthropic in the case of Claude and doesn't get stored there, and it doesn't get used to train their model. There's an exception to this, particularly for Anthropic. So if you use any MCP connection of any kind, the zero data retention policy no longer applies. And this is something you can find when you dig through Anthropic's docs. When you use any MCP connection, whether it's for Kapoq or anyone else's that has your data or someone else's data on it, that actually will be kept for some time within Anthropic. I think right now it's roughly around a 30-day policy. They're not using it for anything nefarious, but they're doing things like checking that there's not misuse, you're not violating terms and conditions. But it's just something to think about. Kapoq, we're ISO 27001 certified company, so it's a security certification a company can get. And ISO is asking all of us to start thinking about AI, like how does this change our security posture and our policies? So especially for bigger companies, this is going to be something you need to hit head on. How are you going to incorporate things like that, especially around MCP and no longer having that zero data retention policy anymore within your company's policy and your security policy? It's something very important to think about. That's like more on the policy side. Secondarily, a great thing to think about and a good practice I would recommend is if you're going to share anything you create with anyone, I'd highly recommend in your session, just have it do a security pass, or we call it a red team in coding. Just say, hey, launch an agent and do a red team from a security perspective on this dashboard, for example, that I just created. And it'll give you its honest assessment, and it'll just alert you to any potential security vulnerabilities or things you should be on the lookout for. Definitely recommend that pass. Obviously, adhere to your own company's security policy, but I think that's good practice, and that's something we do within Kapoq ourselves.
George, if I could just jump in real quick. If anybody does have questions, please ask in the chat and Q&A. And just a reminder, the webinar is being recorded and we'll send it out afterwards. But George, I have a question as it relates to security. In your opinion, who should be responsible for the security policies around AI at a brand or an agency? That's first.
Yeah, that's a great question. At any company in general, agency or brand, you're typically going to have a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. So if you have that kind of typical corporate structure, it would be that person. But if you don't have that person, you probably do want to designate. We're not going to tell people how to run their company or organize their security policy, but it's not bad practice for everyone in an organization to think about security. And then another point to your question, Mark, is that we're dealing with Amazon data, Walmart data from these platforms, right? Those, you got to read the terms and conditions, and those companies, depending on what level of a relationship you have with them, will have their own security requirements on you because you're pulling data from, say, Amazon. For example, for Kapoq, like we do a periodic audit with Amazon just because we're a third-party solution provider. And they have a lot of requirements. It's a good thing. It helps protects everyone's data, but a lot of people aren't thinking about those requirements. So if you're, for example, an agency, you're essentially like the custodian of your customers, your brand's data on behalf of, say, an Amazon. And it's just something you always want to keep in the back of your mind. And when you're using these AI tools, you're essentially developing code. And you should just always have that security mindset, be defensive, be protecting that data.
Got it. So follow-up question to that. Is this a traditional development type problem or something unique to development with AI?
I think it's unique to AI only in that it's opened the door for a lot of people who don't have development experience to start doing development. So I think from a standard security, for someone who's been in computer science for a long time, I think it hits on a lot of the things we've known about security, but you have to reframe it in the context of realizing that AI is just another one of these third-party tools, just like cloud services, just like any software you might bring into your organization. And you just got to pay attention where with how it's using your data, where it's sending your data, and things like that.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Appreciate it.
For sure.
So it doesn't look like there's any questions as it relates to the few slides that we went over. So let's just jump into the demo, and as questions come in, I'll interrupt or find the right time. But yeah, let's jump into it.
Sounds good, Mark. All right, let me share my screen here. All right, can you see my Claude desktop? All right,
Yep, see it now.
excellent. So a couple of quick things here. We internally at Kpoc use Claude a lot. I actually use not this application. Actually, I'll just show you real quick. I actually use the Claude Code CLI, which looks like this. Looks a little more old school. It just has a lot more lower level features, but that's actually what I use to code. But a lot of the same functionalities here on desktop. And I think desktop is a sweet spot for many of the people we work with. It gives you that nice balance of being able to do things on your computer. For that to happen, it needs to be in co-work mode. So that's a setting we recommend if you're using Claude specifically. But it also lets you preview slides, PDFs really nicely, things that the CLI isn't really designed to do. That's more for dedicated coders, I would say. So this Claude desktop co-work, I think, is a sweet spot for a lot of the things we're going to demo here. The first thing we're going to do is I prepared a very simple skill. And we're using, for everyone on the call is probably familiar with the Kapoq's MCP connector. We have internally a connection we use for testing that's an anonymized version of a willing participant. One of our customers is a willing participant of letting us anonymize their data and using this to demo and using for internal testing. We call it Archipelago. It's a tropical / boat life themed anonymization of a current customer's data through the Kapoq MCP connector. So I prepared a skill that's going to help us analyze for one of the brands why it's down in sales month over month. So I've already uploaded this skill, and you can go into the plus here on Claude Desktop, and it's called Diagnosing Kapoq Data. So if you have an uploaded skill, you can find it here, and you can just click on it. You can see it's just going to do this. This is called a slash command. You could just type this. A slash is going to be like a special command to Claude, and then it usually opens up a skill or some other command that's supported in the environment. And then you just give it a prompt. So the brand we're looking at is called Coral Bay. So we're going to say diagnose Coral Bay using the Archipelago Kapoq MCP connector. It's always good practice, by the way, to specify the name of your MCP connection you want to use, because you can have many of these open at the same time in a session, and you want to make sure you're looking at the right data. So that's another little tip we recommend. Also, I'll just point out, I'm using Haiku 4.5. And for those who are aware, this is like the simplest, fastest model, or one of the simplest and fastest ones that Anthropic offers. I'm doing this a little bit just for expediency in the demo. In reality, especially if you're going to diagnose something, you might want to use a more powerful model, Opus even. Sonic's great too, though. But just again, for speed, I'm going to use Haiku. The interesting thing, though, is if you have a well-designed skill, which is the thrust of what we're going to get into today, using even a simpler model isn't necessarily a bad thing. You don't necessarily gain more with the more powerful model and spending the more tokens if you've specified the question well enough and you're using a very well-defined skill. So this isn't always a bad thing. All right, so I'm going to have it kick off. And what this is going to do is it's going to go out, connect to the Archipelago MCP server, It's going to first just confirm Coral Bay really is a brand there. This is part of the thing we offer as part of the MCP server. It gives that context on what data is in there. So you don't really have to know a lot of the nitty gritty details about what's available. The AI can figure it out with help from us behind the scenes. Okay, so here's the thing. With this skill, I talked about planning and asking clarifying questions earlier, right? So one of the things we told this skill to do was to ask clarifying questions. And so this is what you get with that. We purposely left a few holes here, but in reality, you're never going to fully specify something. And so they want to know, for example, the skill wants to know what behavior you're concerned about. And you can answer these questions and just in a very simple way, just hit one and just say, let's say sales down month over month. Two, what comparison baseline? Yeah, you can just say last month. Three, scope. Let's do all ASINs. Why not? And then four, and it wants to know if it's a seller or vendor. Say, please figure that out for us. I know the answer, but just to show you what it can do. On your own.
And George, if I can jump
Yeah, jump
in,
in.
this is actually a question that came in as you were doing that. You don't have to stay in the confines of those bullet points in the clarifying questions.
You do not. That's a great question. That's just a guide. It's basically probing you to give it a little more helpful context and be a little more specific. But you could actually not answer all the questions, or you could add extra stuff for sure.
Great.
That's a great question. So okay, so it's going to work through systematically vendor sales. Okay, so it's going to give you its plan here. It's going to analyze the Coral Bay. Again, this is a fictional brand, but it's based on real data. The month over month sales drop. So here's what it's going to do. It's going to look at top 10 ASINs, which makes a lot of sense. So now here's the interesting thing. Let's ask us another question. So it says, does this plan look right? Always good to double check the plan. In fact, when you're doing almost anything with AI, spend most of your time, if you can, on the planning part. It's time well spent. And if you do spend your time there and are very specific, you'll find you have very little to do after the execution is done. It's probably going to be very close, if not exactly what you want. So yeah, we'll say one, yes, that looks right. And this is the interesting question that goes to our sub agent topic earlier. It's saying, should I use this main session, or a sub agent? It actually here, and don't be afraid if it doesn't give you the recommendation to ask it for its recommendation, because it'll know based on the problem it'll have some good insights as to which one it should do. And you can take its recommendation. Here it says use the main session because it thinks the queries are actually straightforward and actually keeps all the context fresh here, which is a great thing to do. But actually, just for the sake of being interesting, I'm going to go with two. You can disagree with this recommendation. And I'm going to just show you what a sub-agent one looks like. I think it's just going to dispatch one. But what it's essentially going to do is it's going to dispatch an agent with a fresh brain, a fresh context window, do the analysis, and report back to the main session. So that's what's going to happen. So one, yes. Two, use sub-agents.
So, George, one more question that came in, and it ties to, I think, what you're doing now. So, what should a user do when AI gives an answer that sounds confident, but being that they're all experts in the data and their clients, if they're not sure, what's the right path? Do you go and launch a sub agent or something else?
You're saying if who's not sure? I'm not sure I quite understood the question.
Yeah, so the AI sounds confident in the answer that is given, but the user isn't so sure it's right,
Oh
what would
yeah,
be the best practice?
yeah, it's your tool. So if you think you're right and it's wrong, go with what you think. It's your tool. Just like Word might think of it like any software tool. Word might auto correct a spelling that's a very simple comparison, but you're like, no, I actually want it spelled that way. That's totally fine. Yeah, it's your tool. I think that's the best way to answer that question. And the other thing to that point, Mark, is don't hesitate, especially if you're going to use a faster model. It really applies here. Don't hesitate to actually try both if you want to. Spawn off another session. You can even ask it to dump a quick synopsis of the context you've created so far in your current session and say, hey, I want to spawn another session. Give me a summary of what happened here. I'm going to paste that into another session because you can just do a new task and this one will still be here. You can come back to it. And we'll see that in a little bit too. But do both. That's another option. See what gives you the better answer. And quite frankly, that's an interesting way to use AI that not a lot of people do, even in the development side, is if you can spare the time and tokens, you actually can get better results if you try a few different things and then take the best result.
Makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So it made a mistake here. It's actually a brand. So let's just answer, and I'm not even going to answer the rest of the questions here. So this will be a great example. Say Coral Bay is a brand, not an account. This actually, quite frankly, happened probably because I'm on Haiku. So Sonnet and Opus usually don't make a mistake like that, but this will happen with AI, and it's so yeah. It says got it. So no problem. And these run queries, you can dig into some more nitty gritty details, especially in Kapoq on what it's doing. But this under the hood is actually calling something in the Kapoq MCP server called run query. It's a tool there that actually lets it execute a SQL query directly on our cloud ClickHouse database where the underlying data lives. It's interesting because I actually beforehand I prepared another version of this, also taking the sub agent approach, because especially with Haiku, as I alluded to, you can get the AI, there's randomness, right? So you can get different results on different runs. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. Okay, so now I found it. So it has a decline diagnosis. Okay, yeah, it tells us a little bit about it. Okay, so yeah, it has most likely root causes, inventory stockouts, fulfillment delays. Actually, to this point, I kind of want to let me just pop this up here. And I want to show everyone an alternate version of how this could have gone. So here I did a sub-agent approach. You can even see the questions look a little different, even though I exact same prompt starting point. So it does it. First of all, it didn't even have that error. It found it right away. And it actually found, in talking to the person whose data this is anonymized from, they confirmed this is actually probably the biggest reason. But the stockouts is right up there too, that the other one identified. But I just want to show you two different runs and you get some different answers. But there is overlap, right? They both caught the stockouts, for example. Now, again, if you use something like Opus with a more powerful model, you're going to get more consistency in general. So real quick, we can just do, and this will take a little bit of time to run, but I just want to show what's possible. So one real quick thing I just want to add here is that, especially when you're using Kapoq mode, you got to think it's really important to think of the AI here as like a automated user of what's available on your local computer, which is powerful. And again, you got to think about that from a security perspective and your company's policy perspective. But when you have that power, a really nice thing you can do with it is a lot of people are like, how can I share? I want to generate maybe a PDF that I want to share with my customer and show them the analysis. So there's many ways you can do that. One easy way though is on your computer, and I have this set up, you can install a Google Drive for desktop. So if you like to share things on Google Drive, for example, you can actually ask it to generate this report and upload it there for you to a specific folder. And you can use other things. So you can use Office 365, anything you might install on your computer that's usable locally, this thing can use. So let's just demo that real quick. So I'll just say generate a short slide presentation of results. And I'll say as a PDF. Again, try to be as specific as you can and upload it to the briefing for Mark. So I prepared this folder for Mark to get this briefing, to the briefing for Mark folder, available in desktop. Okay, so this is going to churn for upwards of 10 minutes or so. And I just want to show you real quick, as this is going, you have a couple options, right? Because some things do take time with the AI, even with a fast model. You can easily just go new task, right? And you haven't lost it. It'll either be under your recents, or if you pinned it, you can keep recent stuff pinned here. You can see it's still working. I can just go back to it and check in on it. It's still going. But I can also just do a new task right here. And then this thing will change to a little icon that lets you know when it's done. Also, if you have desktop notifications, you can be checking email, whatever, it'll pop up as a desktop notification saying when it's done, and you can come back and check in on it. The other thing you can do too, and I think we showed this in the last webinar, was you can set up a scheduled event, right? So you can do a new task, you can name it, give it a description, you can even tell it what you want to do. And you can have it in Kapoq, you can actually choose an existing project you've set up. You can tell it to use that skill, that diagnosis skill I was using here, and you can set up the frequency. And as long as your computer, right now, Anthropic does offer some cloud versions of this, but as long as your computer's up, you can actually have this run on whatever schedule you want, and it'll generate it for you, and it'll be waiting, ready for you to take a look at. But yeah, this will take a little bit. Oh yeah, and so especially for this, you can pre-allow some of this stuff, but it doesn't hurt, again, from a security perspective, especially if you're going to let it access stuff in your Google Drive, to, at least for the first few runs, manually check it, and then you can allow it, and you can set it up to allow all the time if you want, if you feel comfortable with what it's doing. But for now, we'll just authorize it for this task here. Okay, and actually it ran pretty quickly this time. So okay, so let's check out the briefing for Mark folder. This was an old one I had prepared in case it took a long time, but this is the new one it just uploaded. You can see this is the current timestamp. This is what it created. Okay, so it's nothing fancy. Honestly, what I would do is this doesn't look very nice, in my opinion. It gives the results, but I would say you can tune on this, right? So you can say, this worked great, but the PDF slides are a bit bland and the text is very small. Please make some improvements. And this is just for demo. Obviously, you might have specific improvements you want to do. So I'll let it churn on that. The cool thing about this at the end of the day is you saw the skill I invoked at the very beginning, this diagnosing Kapoq data. Again, this is like a toy skill just for the purposes of demoing. Once we get all this to a point we like it and we're like happy that it's consistently uploading to the Google Drive, we like the format it's generating, the style it's generating, you're going to want to iterate that on that multiple times and consider that like you're developing software. Because a coder, like we don't get things right the first cut. It's not what the customer wanted. We have bugs. All these things happen, right? So we're usually iterating many times, like 10 times maybe even for a project. You're going to be doing the same thing even for a dashboard when you're creating a skill for the first time. Think of it like you're developing software. And when you do that iteration, you're going to get it to a point where it's doing exactly what you want very consistently. And then once you have it in a consistent state, again, you just set it up as like a scheduled task and it'll do it the same way every time. So now, yeah, okay. So it now has a new version it's uploading. That'll take a little bit of time. But what the cool thing is, once you get it to this state, you can literally just type a prompt here that says, please update that skill with all the refinements we've done in this session. And then it'll just update the skill for you. And then going forward, you have a skill that's more tuned to what you're trying to do. So, Mark, that's like the gist. And we don't have to wait for this thing to finish. I can certainly show the new results when it's done, but I want to leave it open for questions here and any other things we want to discuss.
I have a question. So you talked about feeding the or commenting and thinking like a developer, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a developer. Most of the people in the audience are not developers. So how does somebody like me get to the point where I can harness the power of of the MCP, leveraging Claude, leveraging ChatGPT if I'm not a developer?
No, that's a really good question. And I think that's the thrust of it, right? Is surprise, we're all developers now. And that's the cool thing about AI. But in terms of answering your question, I think a very good answer is going back to that concept of iterating. I think it's some people, it may come naturally. Certainly, it wasn't natural to me when I was young and I was first getting into computer science. I had to learn by doing and writing code many years ago. But whether it comes naturally or not, I think that's a very key habit to pick up is don't just do one cut and be happy with it, especially if you're really not happy with it. Don't hesitate to try multiple variations of it. Do really work with it to say, this isn't quite right. I more want this. And, or say, hey, why did it, another great example, why did it take you two questions to get to what I was really after? How do we refine this going forward so that you get to what I'm trying to analyze much more quickly with less questions to me, maybe? And all those things you just do in the session. And at the end of the day, just say, hey, write this as a skill if it's not already a skill, or update the skill we're working on. And that now you'll walk away with essentially a piece of software, a script, like for the AI to follow next time that is doing what you want.
Cool. So got one question that came in. Why might the AI give different results slash different questions when using the same skill?
That's a great question. And part of it is because there's randomness involved, quite frankly, under the hood with these AI models. There's just probable, it's like under the hood, it's like a neural network. And it's trying to play, it's called, and I don't want to get too technical, but it's like playing guess the next character, guess the next token, which could be a character or a few characters or a word game. So it's trying to guess the next thing you mean based on your prompt. But it's doing that with like bazillions of sample data, right? But all the things that it might choose to guess the next word based on your prompt are all weights. They're all probabilistic weights. And so every time you run it, you're rolling a dice. And you're going to get pretty consistent results if you're pretty specific and you're using a powerful model, but it can vary. And the amount it varies is going to depend on a couple of things: how powerful the model is. Also, what's going to matter is how specific your prompt and your skill are. The more specific, the more likely it is to be consistent. And thirdly, how much of the context window is filled up. That's a big one. So if you're in a session that you've been using for a lot of stuff and it's like, they try to use tricks, they'll try to compact stuff so it's never gets really full. But if it has a lot of junk in there that's not relevant, you're actually going to make your results less consistent. So that's why starting off with a fresh agent as much as you can with a fresh brain is very important.
Got it. Okay. So follow-up question. So considering that randomness, are there
Yeah.
certain questions or tasks that might be most unreliable or inconsistent?
No, I wouldn't say it'd be case by case. I would say that the sky's the limit. It's really up to your imagination on what you can do with it. I wouldn't say there's a task that's necessarily better or worse for AI. It's going to be limited to how well you prompt it and how good the data is you're giving it, those kinds of things.
Okay. Another question that came in from the audience. What makes the AI better at getting to the root cause instead of just summarizing surface level performance changes?
Really good question. So what makes it better is how good your prompting is. And that's really what the skill is. A skill is just a preset prompt, essentially. It's a long prompt usually, but it's saying, and the skill might encompass cases. Hey, if you suspect a stock out, explore that stock out and point that out as the answer, right? Instead of stopping there and being like, hey, maybe it's a stock out, maybe it's something else, maybe it's a traffic problem, and asking you what you want it to do. You can actually have cases within your skill. And you don't have to actually write it up that way. You can have the AI set that up for you based on it asking you clarifying questions along the way in your session. So making it more specific is really about, again, that concept of iteration and getting at what you're looking to pull from the AI as a diagnostic. And you can take the same problem, give it to two different people with the same model and everything, and one person can have a much higher quality answer than the other if the other person is iterating and keeping all those pointers in mind. And not only that person might be able to forever memorialize that as a skill that then does it that well in the future too.
Got it. And then is there a way to prevent AI from filling in gaps with assumptions when it doesn't have enough context?
That is an awesome question. And yes, one of the core ways to do that is when you're setting up your skill initially. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we're launching some skills that people are going to be able to use. But what you want to do is you want to put in that skill. You want to have it ask clarifying questions wherever it can instead of trying to fill in the blanks. And you can just be explicit about that. You can just say, hey, I'm trying to build a skill to do a brand diagnostic for X, whatever you're looking at on the brand. I want you to ask me clarifying questions in the building of the skill and one as part of the skill. So if the prompt isn't specific enough or holes, do ask the user clarifying questions as like a gate, like an impassable gate, like it must ask you questions essentially. Now, what those questions are going to be a little bit geared towards, again, the way to build a skill is to have an interactive session first and get at what you're trying to build the skill around and then skillify that at the end. But as part of that, when you say build the skill, say, please ask clarifying questions if we're not staying on track with what I'm intending to do here.
Cool.
But it's a really important question because honestly, Mark, I see this in coding, especially. This is where you get very different quality results in code. People who use something like superpowers tend to get much better, I think, optimal results. Not optimal all the time, but I think higher quality results, more consistent results. Because one thing superpowers always does when you're doing a coding project is asking these clarifying questions. Hey, you mentioned this table in the database schema, but actually there's this thing there that's not exactly what you meant, or there's like this other subtlety in the architecture that maybe we're not considering. Like you wanted to ask those kinds of questions for sure.
Cool.
I see this all the
Um,
time, and I'll just add real quick. Like my
yeah.
son, right, Minecraft videos, and he likes to watch modders, people who like make Minecraft mods. And we are watching one just last night of a Minecraft modder who was using a Chat GPT in the web to make his Minecraft mod. And I was pointing out to my son, I'm like, "Hey, Georgie, look, that's cool what he's doing. That's awesome, right? Look, you can make your Minecraft mods there." But he was just pasting. He was just pasting in what he wanted. Didn't have any plan. Didn't have any clarifying questions. He had to iterate a lot to get to what he wanted. It took many steps, and he had to cut the video right to get to the final result, which was still not even quite what I think he wanted in the end. But it's just funny. You can see this everywhere. It can save you a lot of time to plan and get those questions answered.
And that's where skills come in, right?
Yes. Yes. Superpower is the one I mentioned is a skill. Building your own skills, it's not unique to superpowers or any plugin or anything we'll provide from Kapoq. Everyone has the power to make a skill where you have that planning phase, questioning phase. And it's just something I recommend.
Cool. All right. So do we want to show the updated PDF?
Oh, yeah, let's show that real quick. Good call. All right, yeah, let me just make sure that actually might need to refresh this or that doesn't look like they're right. Might need to refresh this. Sorry. Give me a second. Or it's just not there or it hallucinated and didn't actually put it in there. So let me just say, I don't see it. see the new PDF. I'll just ask it in case I missed it or I'm not refreshing it or something. But yeah, this kind of thing can happen. Again, I just want to caveat we're using Haiku. So the unpredictability and mistakes are going to generally be a lot higher than using Sonnet or Opus. Oh, and it's yeah, it did make a mistake. It says
So George, one question that came in. What is
it's
the
going to
best way to
be
build a skill?
great question. They so in within Anthropic, they actually have a skill called Skill Creator. And it should actually invoke this. That's the neat thing about skills in Claude, especially. It should auto invoke these. Actually, let me just show you where you can see these better. You can go to customize. You can create skills for your organization, like if you're an admin for your Claude account, but you can also create personal skills. And here's the skill creator. This one is, yeah, built in by Anthropic. Kind of gives you a little synopsis here. Yeah, writes a draft of the skill. You can see it does some testing for you. But this is honestly, even though this is a skill about building skills, it's actually a great, really nicely structured skill. These are the kind of things that you want in a good skill. Repeat until you're satisfied. See, again, harping on that iterative mindset. Yeah. And so you can see this is what it looks like. Communicate with the user. Yeah. And this is great. The skill creator is liable to be used by people across a wide range of familiarity with coding jargon. Tells the AI how to deal with that. But this is a great one to use. Superpower is the plugin I mentioned. People are interested in that. I can send that out later. You can see I have that even installed in Claude Code. That one is definitely geared more towards coding, but it doesn't have to be. That one also has its own skill creator skill. But I think the Anthropic one is perfectly good. I would say make sure this skill gets invoked. If not, let me just show you how you would invoke it. Just in case, if you want to be really sure, you go to the plus, go to skills, and you'll see it's here built in, skill creator. And you can see it'll do the slash command, and it's hard to see, but there's a space after that. And you can say create a skill to do X. Start it off like that. That's how I would start it off. And you can be vague. It's going to ask you clarifying questions. Yeah. I'll try to see if
Cool.
I can give an example of. I have a lot of things I try to prepare from here.
Hey, George, I got one question
Keep
that
going with
came in.
questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a broad one. Are you able to explain in detail the Kapoq MCP, what it can do, tools? Does it explain to AI when to use different tools, or would that be in the skill? Don't be
good
afraid to
question.
get,
I mean,
don't be afraid to
go
get
ahead.
technical. Any insight is appreciated. Word for word.
Perfect. Yeah, no, great question. Both are true. That's a big part of the MCP server is the model and the context. That's the M and the C in there. And the context is huge because ultimately you have a bunch of these things called tools. One of them is something that just lets you run a SQL query, but other of the tools, we have multiple of these tools in there, and it's like a menu of things that the AI sees when it connects to the MCP server, ours or anyone else's. It sees this menu of tools with literal like text, like you saw there for the skill creation, that says what these tools should be used for, what they do, how to use them correctly. All these things are in there. And there'll be things like sample data. There'll be a skill that's just sampling data in Kpox in particular. And then there'll be ones that are like run your query. Once you have a sampling and understanding of the stuff that's in there, then you can execute a customized query. That's another tool. So we provide, that's one of the value adds we provide is the ability to, even though we have, I think 24 tables in there now, something like that, you don't have to know necessarily those details. You're free to get that because the deeper you want to understand about how things are working under the hood, how we implement the MCP server, that's great because that gives you more power to get more out of it that you want. But you don't have to know that. Like all that stuff's explained as like a menu and a play. It's really like a playbook for the AI that explains everything that's there. Now, with that said, when you're doing specific deep dives on your brands, your accounts, things like that's where you probably want to get more into the skill building, something that's more custom to your situation and the structure of your data within Kpoq. Different agencies, different brands are going to have different kinds of data and even though the structure of the playbook's the same, their data is going to look different, right? A different scale of agency, different goals of what they're trying to accomplish. That's where I think the skill comes in. It's like a layer that the end user would customize on top of our MCP, if that makes sense.
Yep, got it. Cool. Thank you for that.
Good stuff.
No, no more questions that have come in.
Okay. Well, we don't have to wait for this. This is probably going to run for another several minutes. I guess this would be a good time to maybe announce the K stack.
Yeah.
We're launching, people are familiar with GitHub. We actually launched a repository. It's empty. It has a README file in it, but we're going to start uploading a skill, including this demo skill. We're going to mark it appropriately as a demo only skill. This isn't something we encourage you to use. It's just something you can play around with and iterate with based on going back to this webinar video. You can look at the steps, do your own customizations, just explore modifying the skill yourself and maybe turning it into something you would use internally. That's free for you to use. Basically, we're uploading skills there that are under the MIT open source license. So you can use it for whatever you want. You can even copy it, distribute it yourself. And the name of it is the K stack. And so why do we choose K stack? K for Kapoq, obviously, but we were inspired by this guy. Some people may be familiar with him, Gary Tan, who's the head of Y Combinator, the startup incubator. And he created his own huge, what he called the G stack, G for Gary, G stack of a list of a bunch of skills that you can use to customize agents that actually take on different roles in his company, both for answering emails down to implementing code, testing code, like a whole swath of stuff in the G stack. So we were inspired by that example. And so we created the K stack. But we'll be putting in maybe every week or 2 weeks, we'll be adding 1 or 2 skills over time and we'll refine them internally. Again, you can use these directly or as a starting point for your own custom work. But we'll be having things that do analysis, create dashboards, also working with Kapoq. Because right now our MCP server is read only. You can only get data from data link. It doesn't let you take actions. We do that as a safety feature right now. But what you can still do with it is take your data and modify bulk uploads to a Kapoq. So we're going to build some skills around, for example, creating your keyword harvesting rules, which we know can be tricky as a pain point. So you could, for example, take this skill we're going to eventually put on there, give it for your account, give it the template from Kapoq, and it'll fill it in based on what you want it to harvest instead of having to get every single rule exactly right. So that we're launching that today. It'll start again with the demo skill, but we'll be sending email announcements out and uploading a bunch of skills over time.
Awesome. Yeah, it's exciting. And it's the first step of offering more from MCP and also adding functionality that you can leverage MCP and AI to push updates into Kapoq, which is super exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. It looks like it's still churning, but we have a couple more minutes. If there are any outstanding questions, lob them in and we'll make sure that they're answered. Yes, we are
Oh,
going
yeah.
to,
Go ahead.
sorry, we're going to share this recording of the presentation after. You can be sure of that. George, I think I interrupted you.
No, that's no problem at all.
So if there aren't any other questions, we can go ahead and wrap this up. And thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate it. We're going to continue to do these as we further develop and roll out new features and functionality around our data link service and MCP. So be on the lookout for more Ask Me Anythings. And George, really appreciate your time and thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.